Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
So welcome back to Gay Buddhist Fellowship. We will go around and say our names. I'll start with the people online. Today we have Brad, Larry, Bob, Christian, Daniel, Frisco, Greg, Joe, Marvin, Michael, Richard, Steve, and Tom. And yes, and Larry. In here at Bartlett Street, my name is Cass.
Ari, Luis, Aaron, Jared, Stephen,
Matthew,
Marty,
Kevin,
George, Grisha, Michael, Jack,
I'm Richard.
Donnie, Robert.
Great. Our speaker today is Larry Robinson, and there we are. Larry Robinson has been practicing Buddhism for 47 years, mostly in the Zen and Vipassana traditions. He is a member of the Occidental Laguna Sangha in Sebastopol, studying with Bruce Fortin in the lineage of Suzuki Roshi. A longtime environmental and social justice activist, he is a retired ecopsychologist and former mayor of Sebastopol. He serves on the board of directors of the Center for Climate Protection and the board of trustees of Meridian University. His, quote, large and foolish project, in the words of Rumi, is to restore the soul of the world through reawakening the oral tradition of poetry. He is also the founder and producer of Rumi's Caravan, devoted to the oral tradition of poetry. That website is rumiscaravan.com. So welcome, Larry.
Thank you very much, Cass. Great honor and delight to be with you all again. I apologize for not joining you in person. We're going to be spending Thanksgiving with my 98-year-old father-in-law, so I don't want to risk carrying COVID to him in any way. So I appreciate your indulgence and this Zoom format, which is imperfect, but the best we've got. So Han Shan, that great and crazy Chinese poet 1,000 years ago, said, we're all like bugs in a bowl. I say, that's right. Every day climbing up the sides, sliding back down over and over again. So sit in the bottom of the bowl, head in your hands, moan, cry, feel sorry for yourself, or look around. Greet your fellow bugs, say, hey, how are you doing? Say, nice bowl. So here we are sitting in this nice bowl. And in the Zen tradition, we sit not in order to improve ourselves or to become better people or to achieve nirvana or enlightenment, but simply to express our true nature, which we call Bodhicitta, the underlying reality of all things. So if you can, for just a moment, imagine that you are the Buddha, that you are the enlightened one looking out through these eyes at the world. And in fact, that is who you are and what you are and all you are. But imagine that you have no fear. There is nothing to worry about. You don't have to worry about your health, about your relationship or your job or the state of the world. There's nothing to worry about. All that you see is you. And so you experience the world through gift bestowing eyes, and you bless and love and wish the best for everyone and everything. This is who you really are. And yet, because we are human beings, and because of our, as they say, ancient twisted karma, we fall into reactionary behaviors and mental reactions that lead us to believe mistakenly that the world is something other than us, that we are separate from the world and we are separate from each other. This is the fundamental illusion. And our Buddhist practice is all about remembering our true nature. So in the Mahayana tradition, which includes Zen and Tibetan Vajrayana practice, we talk about and offer the Bodhisattva precepts. There are 16 precepts, and these should be understood not as commandments. Thou shalt and thou shalt not, and you're going to be damned for all eternity if you break this precept. No, these are guidelines for experiencing the world through the eyes of a bodhisattva. These are essentially a roadmap for remembering who you really are. And as with our sitting practice, when we drift off into thoughts or sleep or wherever we drift, as happens most of the time when we're meditating, the real work is simply to come back. Notice I have been grasping thoughts. I have been in sleepy mind. I have been monkey mind. I'm back to my breath, back to moment. So it is when we are practicing the precepts. If we fail to observe one or more or all of them, the practice is just to acknowledge that and come back and experience the world as it is in this moment, which includes gentleness and forgiveness for ourselves, for our human imperfection, and for our ancient twisted karma, which is not our fault. So the first of these 16 precepts are the refuges, which I think we're all familiar with. I take refuge in the Buddha, which means I rest in that fundamental ground of being, which is awakening mind. I take refuge in the Buddha. And then I take refuge in the Dharma, which on one level means I take comfort and refuge in the teachings of the Buddha and in the practice of Buddhism. But on a deeper level, what it means is I relax completely into just the nature of existence, that knowing that it is all okay, no matter what. Even if it's not okay, that's okay. And the third refuge is I take refuge in the Sangha, which on one level is all of us gathered in this real and virtual room sharing this practice. But on a bigger level, it means I remember that I am a member of this unbounded web of all beings. I am a member of the community of all beings. And there is no way that I can be outside of this community of all beings. I am held in this. This is my body. All beings, all human beings, all animals, all plants, all life, all sentient beings are my community. This is where I belong, and here I can find refuge. And then there are the three pure precepts. How it's often expressed is the Bodhisattva, or the one who is wise, avoids all actions that lead to suffering. And the one who is wise takes all actions that lead to happiness and awakening. And Shantideva, the great Buddhist sage from about the time of Christ, said, the source of all human suffering is the wishing for happiness for oneself. And the source of all happiness is the wishing of happiness for others. In other words, when we separate ourselves from the web of life, this is where suffering begins. And the third precept, third pure precept is, in all my actions, I will consider others. In other words, this is the fundamental Bodhisattva vow, to live with and for all beings, to participate joyfully in the suffering of the world. Then what are called the 10 grave precepts are actually refinements of the previous 3, just fine-tuning how to practice avoiding actions that lead to suffering, and how to practice and recognize actions that lead to awakening and happiness, and how to remember that the real path to happiness is through loving and serving all beings. So the first of these grave precepts, and you'll recognize all of them we are all probably living all of these as much as we can all the time. But they're just laid out in a way that functions as kind of a compass to keep us on track to remembering who we are and why we're here. So the first of these says, a bodhisattva, the one who is wise, does not kill, but rather protects and reveres and nurtures all life. And I know none of us are out to commit murder, but if there's a fly or an insect buzzing around your head, do you slap it? If there's a trail of ants in your kitchen, what do? Do you eat meat? Do you participate in the death of other creatures? These are not hard and fast rules, but these are guidelines and questions for us to consider as we make our choices. And a way to approach questions like that is, does this make me feel more connected to all of life or separate from it? So the second grave precept is, the one who is wise does not steal, but accepts what is freely offered. And here again, it can get very, very subtle, but the question is, does this separate you from others or bring you closer? Does your living depend on something else? Does your having enough depend on somebody else having less? Or is there a way for all beings to have enough? The third grave precept is the Bodhisattva speaks truthfully, but does not lie or attempt to deceive. Most of us don't lie as a matter of course, but we also tell stories about ourselves. We want to make ourselves look good in the eyes of others. I mean, that's part of being human. But it means sometimes we shade things a little bit and we don't risk the truth. So the precept of speaking the truth is a way to help us remember to risk living truthfully. The fourth precept is that the one who is wise respects all intimate relationships and does not abuse the power of sexuality. And traditionally in monasteries, this meant celibacy. But for most of us living in the world, that is neither a beneficial or a desirable way to live. But we need to recognize the power of sexuality and the potential for harming others. So the precept reminds us to use our sexuality consciously and wisely. The next precept says that the person who is wise, the Bodhisattva, maintains clarity of mind and intention and avoids substances and ideologies that intoxicate. And I particularly like the subtlety of this one of intoxicate. Well, and we all know what substances can do, whether it's alcohol or drugs. But we can also lose our perspective through ideologies. And I think we're seeing so much of that these days in our culture and in the world. People willing to kill each other for the sake of an idea. So this precept reminds us to examine our own belief structures and not allow that to interfere with our natural human love for each other. The next precept says, the one who is wise does not speak ill of others, but practices loving kindness. And I must admit, I've been struggling with this one a lot lately. When I see people in our public sphere saying and doing things that I see are not helpful, and I find myself judging them. And this precept reminds me to, rather than judging them as someone less enlightened than me, or as a bad person, reminded me this is someone acting out their ancient twisted karma and creating more twisted karma for themselves. So the antidote for this judgment is to practice loving kindness. May this being be happy. May they be free from fear and worry. May they be filled with kindness and generosity. May they be free from suffering and from the causes of suffering. May they live in peace. Sometimes I have to do this a lot. There are some public figures whose photos I keep on my meditation table to remind me not to think ill of them or wish them ill, but to wish them happiness and enlightenment. And the next precept says, the Bodhisattva, the one who is wise, does not praise oneself at the expense of others, but practices humility. So anything that sets us above or apart from others is actually adding to the suffering in the world and adding to our own suffering. We may think that if I'm superior to these other people, that somehow I'm going to be safe. Not so. The next precept, I realize I'm running along here. So Cass, stop me if I get run onto.
We have plenty of time. We have about 25 more minutes.
Oh, okay, good. I thought I had 30. All right. I don't have that much to say, but so the next one reminds us of the burden of riches. The one who is wise does not hoard wealth, but practices generosity. And the practice of generosity, of dana, is the antidote to our own feelings of lack, of not having enough. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I have a Tibetan tanka, actually Bhutanese, that is the wheel of life. It's the other one, I'm sorry, this one. But one of the 6 realms of existence is the realm of the hungry ghosts. And the hungry ghosts And all of us have a hungry ghost inside us. That's the part of us that feels so empty that we want to fill it with stuff and experience. And the antidote, the way out of the hungry ghost hell, is to practice generosity, to remember that we are not other than the homeless person that we pass on the street. We are not other than these children who need our loving attention and teaching. We are not other than the birds in our gardens that are having a hard time finding food in this season. So practicing generosity is what connects us to each other. And the 9th grave precept says that the Bodhisattva does not hold on to anger and resentment, but practices forgiveness. And I think we're seeing a time right now in so many parts of the world, and I'm thinking so much right now of Israel and Gaza, and probably all of you or some of you have friends in both of those communities who are suffering. And we see how the holding on to anger leads to a cycle of revenge and hurt and revenge and hurt and revenge and hurt. And forgiveness is the only way to break this impossible cycle. And forgiveness is hard when you have been wronged, when you have been hurt. But forgiveness doesn't mean saying it's okay what was done to you. But it means releasing the hand of thought, releasing the hurt, holding on to burning coals does not make them less painful. What releases the pain is letting them go. And that's what forgiveness is. Letting go. That reminds me to share a poem. This cycle of revenge. In Israel, there is a game called Hadgaya, which means because of this, I do this. Because of this, you do that. So this poem is from Yehuda Amichai. Says, an Arab shepherd is searching for his goat on Mount Zion. And on the opposite mountain, I am looking for my little boy. An Arab shepherd and a Jewish father, both in their temporary failure. Our voices meet above the Sultan's pool in the valley between us. Neither of us wants the boy or the goat to get caught in the wheels of the terrible Hadgadya machine. Afterward, we found them among the bushes, and our voices came back inside us, laughing and crying. Searching for a goat or a son has always been the beginning of a new religion in these mountains. And I know sitting here in my comfortable, safe home in Sebastopol, California, where there's no bombs falling on my head, it's easy enough for me to say this, but I can't see any way out of the cycle of violence other than the path of forgiveness. And that's why this precept is so important for all of us to be practicing at this time. And the 10th grave precept is to not denigrate the three treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, but to always protect them. In other words, to always remember what is our ground of being, who we are, and where we belong. And that reminds me of another poem by Mark Nepo, who says, I think each comfort we manage, each holding in the night, each opening of a wound, each closing of a wound, each sponged fever, each pulling of a splinter or razored word, each giving of something precious to someone in greater need, each passes on the kindness that we have known. For the human sea is made of waves that mount and merge until the way a nurse rocks a child is how that child, all grown, rocks the wounded, and how the wounded, allowed to go on, rock strangers who in their pain no longer seem so strange. Eventually, this rhythm of kindness is how we pray and suffer by turns. And if someone could watch us from inside the lake of time, they wouldn't be able to tell if we were dying or being born. And it's this opening of our hearts to the suffering of all beings that is in itself nirvana. Suffering is nirvana. The Bodhisattva of compassion, various known as Kuan Yin or Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvar, is the one who hears the cries of the world. And I used to think that that meant hearing the cries of anguish and sorrow and grief. But recently I had an experience that opened that doorway up for me a little more. Last spring, we spent a few days in Paris en route to somewhere else, but we visited the Sainte-Chapelle. I see some of you nodding. You know this cathedral that is it's just pure light and beauty. And you walk up into this space that's just filled with color and light, and it's filled with people taking selfies and talking, and then every few minutes, somebody comes on the loudspeaker in both French and English and other languages, says, please respect the silence. And then the room quiets for a few minutes. So into this sudden silence, a little boy, maybe 10 years old, comes up the stairs, sees this magnificent space, and I hear him yell, wow! And I realized, oh, this is also the cry of the world. Not just sorrow, but this cry of wonder and awe. And that experience just stays with me and continues to open my heart. So I realized that when I open my heart to the sorrows of the world and the suffering in the world, I'm also opening to the beauty and the wonder and the awe and just this bowl. Here we are in this magnificent bowl, and we're all in it together, and how wonderful and miraculous and marvelous it is. So at this point, I think I better shut up and invite any questions or comments. So thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Larry. That was a great reminder of more striving to practice in my life. I'd like to you may be tired of answering questions about this, but when you were in the field of politics, when you were in the mayor, it seems like politics seems like a hell realm, or can be. I mean, it's a place where people come with the things that they earnestly want, not just for themselves, but for others. And also a place where people come with a lot of self-service, I guess. So how did you navigate that realm?
Thank you, Cass. You nailed it. Yes. And people also come with all their projections that they lay on you. So the two practices that were absolutely essential for me in maintaining my equilibrium and continuing to remember to open my heart even when I'm being attacked or tugged. One is metta, the practice of loving kindness. May this person be happy. May they be safe. May they be free from all fears and worries. May they be filled with loving kindness and generosity. May they be at peace. So that one. And the other is a Tibetan practice called Tonglen, which it's kind of a reverse of the New Age practice of breathing in the light, breathing out the darkness. In the Tonglen practice, you breathe in the anger that is directed at you. You breathe in the anger, let it go to the deepest place of your heart where you can convert it to something else, to actually invite it to change into what it's longing to become. So you breathe in the anger and breathe out love. You breathe in the fear and you breathe out patience. You breathe in the darkness and breathe out the light. So that practice, and I got to admit, I rarely practiced it perfectly. I would often have to go home and sit on my cushion and do it a whole lot more after a city council meeting. Like I remember one meeting, it was December, a cold December night. And because of, there was some conflicts in my community and I was the target of a lot of anger. And I tried practicing loving kindness, but inside I was just, I came home, I sat on my cushion. I started sweating. I took off all my clothes. I was still sweating. And for over an hour and a half, I just sweated out all of that toxicity that I had taken in. And at the end of that time, I was able to say to those people, thank you for being my teacher.
Beautiful. Okay, I have a question about poetry. And I love that you pepper your talks with so much poetry. But first, let me ask. Richard has raised his hand, so why don't I let Richard ask his question before I ask a second?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your talk. I'm reminded of a visualization that I was given by my teacher about after prayers to Tara to visualize the loving kindness emanating out from my body to others around me, surrounding area, surrounding state, surrounding country, surrounding continent, until the whole earth is enclosed and out into the universe as the outer reaches of my body. And then, so that's the whole universe is my body. So what you're talking about, the violence that's happening in the world at all times, in some place or another, is kind of like a cancer in my body. And Louise Hay taught me that it's possible that cancer is often caused by anger. And so I think what you gave me insight to is the way that in which, if the whole world is our body, that the parts that our body that are sick, that are ill, are those that are suffering in strife, and we can be compassionate towards that and loving towards that, and use means to address that on our path to healing. So thank you very much for that insight.
You're very welcome, Richard. That's very, very well said. And yes, that practice of remembering that the universe is your body. This is what they call the Bodhikaya. This is the fundamental ground of being. And you are, in fact, that Tathagata, the enlightened one. Good to see you there.
Christian.
Thank you, Larry. I just wanted to thank you very much for reviewing the precepts. For me, at this point in my life and day and week, hearing these again rephrased from the heart is so helpful. So again, thank you very much for this. It's been very good for me.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Anybody else? Okay, I'd like to know about Rumi's caravan. I mean, it seems like it's a practice in some ways. And you mentioned one of the things that I read on the website was that reciting poetry, not just reading it, is beneficial. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I would love to. Well, I had poetry ruined for me in college by professors who taught us to analyze it. You know, Billy Collins has this image of tying the poem to a chair and beating the meaning out of it with a rubber hose. And that's exactly what happened to me. The meaning's gotten beaten out of the poetry. But maybe about 35 years ago, I met a man who I believe used to be a member of your Sangha, Doug Von Koss. I think some of you may remember him, who now is my neighbor here in Sebastopol. To my great gratitude and delight. But I heard Doug reciting a poem from heart. And the poem that he recited, stuck with me, is love comes quietly, finally, drops around me, on me, in the old way. What did I know, thinking myself able to go alone all the way? So when I heard Doug recite that poem, it just, I got it. And hearing a poem recited by someone who's taken it into his body, made it part of him, and then when it comes out, it carries some of his soul with it. So that began a lifelong practice for me of committing poetry to memory. And I have maybe 200 poems that live inside of me now. And they are teachers, they are guides, they are medicine, comfort in hard times, inspiration. So I really encourage people to learn to do that. Start with something short and simple, make it your own. And a group of us who fell in love with the oral tradition poetry started having regular salons of poetry where the only rule was no reading. So we encourage people to commit poetry to memory. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know. And well, a little background here. 10,000 years ago, or maybe, no, about 2,500 years ago, whenever human beings started writing words down, when we started developing written languages, we gained tremendous power to control our environment, but we lost something in that. We started separating ourselves from the soul of the world. So when we started with these poetry salons, our intent was to restore the soul of the world through reviving the oral tradition of poetry. And that's why I call it a large and foolish project, because it's, so Rumi's Caravan, there's a troupe of us that share poetry that we've learned by heart on stage it's actually a conversation in poetic form, but we share it with an audience. And none of us, because each of us has hundreds or some poems committed to memory. So it's unscripted. None of us know what poems we're going to do. So it just comes out like a poetic conversation. So let's see, back in September, we did one in Berkeley at Freight and Salvage. We'll be back there next September. We're going to Davis in December and Mount Shasta in September, June. And anyway, it's one of the great loves of my life. Thank you for asking, Cass. Yeah.
Right. And that's rumiscaravan.com, right? People can.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and I should mention, I also have an email list where I send out a poem a day. So if anybody wants to get onto that list, we also send out notices of Rumi's Caravan. So if anybody wants to get onto that list, I think, Cass, you have my email address.
Mm-hmm. So, I'll share it with the group. Yeah,
just anybody who wants to be on the list, just send me a message saying poetry in the subject line. I'll add you to the poetry list, and Cass can get you my contact information.
Wonderful. Bob.
Thank you so much for everything you've said, and your recent, just moments ago, talking about poetry made me think about a poem I must have learned 60 years ago. Tiny poem that to me is beautiful, wise, and always gets me to think and feel. It's by Emily Dickinson. The pedigree of Clover does not concern the bee. Clover any time to him is aristocracy. I just love that.
Would you do that one more time?
The pedigree of Clover does not concern the bee. Clover any time to him is aristocracy.
Oh, love it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, Emily. Yeah.
I guess that about wraps it up. I guess we'll do thank you so much, Larry.
You're most welcome.
And so we'll have announcements and then dedication of merit. Would you like to do the dedication of merit, or should we do our GDF?
Why don't you do your traditional way?
Okay. Announcements. Do we have a host today? Oh, I'm the host today. So stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. There are some vegan treats to enjoy, and there's hot water for tea. If you have tea, please leave your cup in the sink, and I'll take care of it at the end of the meeting. Let's see. I'll be going around with the Dana bowl. Dana is the Pali word for generosity, and we welcome your contributions in the realm of $10 to $20 or whatever feels comfortable to you. It helps support the rent for this Sangha, the honoraria for our speakers, the newsletter, which goes out quarterly, largely to people who are incarcerated. And it helps, pay for the Zoom and our online presence and our podcasts, which now exceed 800 podcasts, talks, recorded talks. So your generosity is greatly appreciated. Some people gather at the front door around 12:30 to go to lunch. Anybody's welcome to join in them. Next week, we'll have small group discussion. Some the favorite, breaking into small groups to discuss a topic and get to know one another better. Any other announcements?
Yes. As we were talking about before we started today, next week we're quarterly sending out a new 2/3 of the roughly 300 go to Disney. So even though it's Thanksgiving weekend, if you're in town, please come and we can stamp, staple, fold, all that. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Christian.
Yeah, we have a service opportunity. Tom used to pick up our mail and is moving or letting go of that commitment. So we need someone who's willing to stop by the PO box on Market Street. Ooh, the keys are here even. It's just, stop by weekly or every other week and pick up the mail. And there are often letters from the incarcerated Buddhists that receive our newsletter, or people asking about our Sangha, and there's a simple letter that we respond with. We try to connect the prisoners with pen pals through the Zen Center, and so there's a lot of opportunity there for outreach. If you're interested, it's a fun position. I did it for several years, and it's fun to read the letters. It's not too much work. It's like a reason to go to the Castro and see what's still there. If you have questions about it, you can talk to me or Cass after the session.
Okay, so let's gather in circle for the dedication of minutes. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.